Cairo, from the Arabic word meaning triumphant, is the capital city of Egypt. It sits along the Nile River, where the desert and the delta meet.
It's not only the cultural center of the Arab world, but it's Africa's most populous city with a population of more than 22 million people.
While a much more modern city as compared to the depth of Egyptian history, Cairo is surrounded by ancient sites, relics, and countless connections to the past.
32 kilometers south of Cairo, west of the modern Arab village of Saqqara, in the shadow of the Unearthed Pyramid, last excavated over 100 years ago. Archaeologists made a remarkable new discovery, directly next to the original site.
Beneath the sand, at the forgotten, crumbling site, teams unearthed the mouth of a shaft with 2 round holes cut into the ground next to it.
42 tons of debris are removed from the site, including thousands of shards of pottery and rock. But what it reveals has everyone stumped.
13 meters below the ground, they found a 5-meter by 8-meter ventilated room with even more ceramic jars and bowls, a table hewn from huge slabs of rock, and a large vessel still filled with ash, charcoal, and dark sand.
Based on the style of the pottery shards present in the layers throughout the shaft, experts date the site to around 600 BCE, making it around 2,500 years old. But what is this place?
Here in Egypt, you would expect to find an elaborate tomb at the bottom of a shaft like this, but there is nothing decorative about this space, nor is there a sarcophagus.
Egyptian burials ranged from modest shallow graves to elaborate majestic sites, like that of King Khufu's tomb at the Great Pyramid of Giza. The size and style depended on your status or class.
The only similarities of note here are the shaft itself and the air ventilation system. Tombs almost always feature some type of air shaft, believed to maintain airflow and keep the inevitable dust down.
Others believe these air vents may have had a more spiritual purpose, to allow the deceased soul to pass from the chamber and into the afterlife. But with no entombed body present, that reason doesn't really seem to apply.
Investigating further south along the site, they discovered the mouth of yet another shaft. Only this one was much larger and ran 30 meters below the surface.
The shaft is more similar to that of the pharaoh Djoser's tomb, a grand stepped pyramid. It's actually the first ever pyramid built in Egypt. It stands 62 meters above the sand and features a central 28-meter deep burial shaft.
The shaft leads to Djoser's tomb that features ornately carved stone and beautiful blue glazed tile. And it's only a short walk away from this new discovery. So perhaps this shaft leads to another pharaoh.
The shaft at Djoser's tomb is similar to this one, only it leads to something much more grand than the basic structure discovered here. This is a tomb, but something is still not quite lining up.
The newly discovered 30-meter shaft doesn't lead to just one tomb fit for a pharaoh, but contains many levels of niches, rooms, and tombs.
At 3 meters deep, there's a mummy in a small niche. And at 9 meters, there are 2 rooms of mummies, one of which has a few niches for individuals, but also rows of mummies stacked on top of one another.
Amongst the stacks of mummies is the burial of a wealthier woman. She is wrapped in a gilded plaster bodice inside an unfinished sarcophagus.
She was buried next to many Shabbati figures, signifying her wealth and status, and yet also lies beside a very simple burial of a skeleton covered with only 4 stones. It's very strange.
Then, at 17 meters, there are many more mummies stacked on top of one another in the middle of the shaft, including some beautifully painted coffins. These haphazardly placed mummies are right next to the private compartment of 2 men from a single family. The variety here is fascinating.
Continuing the dig, at the bottom of the shaft, they discovered a second, smaller shaft, leading horizontally to a series of 6 tombs, cut into the bedrock.
There's a room to the west of the shaft that houses 2 mummies, one of which is in a very decayed wooden coffin.
This tomb is much more ornate than the discoveries found above it, and yet still more simple when compared to a royal burial. Deciphered inscriptions indicate that there is a priest entombed here.
The priest was wearing a gilded mask with black gemstone inlays for the eyes. Examination of the artifact proved that it was made almost entirely of pure silver, a very rare metal for the time.
Because the tombs of most ancient Egyptian dignitaries were looted, this mask is only the third of its kind ever discovered in Egypt. And it is much more impressive and would have been much more expensive than the gilded plaster mask found in the tomb above.
Ancient Egyptians believed that the bones of their gods were made of silver and their flesh made of gold. Wearing a mask like this, made of precious metals, would have been seen as getting a step closer to the gods.
Famously, Tutankhamun was buried with a glorious double-layered high-carat gold mask. It was inlaid with colored glass, gemstones, quartz, and obsidian.
To the east is one of the larger tombs, and so far the deepest to be excavated. In Egyptian burials, the deeper the tomb, the closer the interred person was to the realm of the afterlife. It holds a single massive sarcophagus with a 5-ton lid, 2 sets of shabtis, and 2 boxes of alabaster canopic jars, used to hold the removed organs of the mummified body.
The jars bear the inscription of the entombed woman named Tadihor. This type and depth of burial, with so many funerary items, would have been very costly.
The last of the chambers contains 4 rotting wood coffins, and among them is a woman named Didibestet, who was buried with 6 canopic jars.
This is strange, because we've only ever seen or read about canopic jars being used in forts. This is because the ancient Egyptians believed that the lungs, liver, stomach, and intestines were each protected by one of the 4 sons of Horus.
The discovery of 6 jars for one person could signify a new style of burial tradition previously undocumented.
CT scans of the additional jars show that they do contain mummified tissues. However, the reason for 2 additional jars is still unknown, and likely doesn't represent a shift in tradition, but rather is just a unique case.
There are so many unique and surprising discoveries at this one site. Frankly, the discovery of a single mummy is still exhilarating and worthy of attention, but 54 mummies, that's really rare. Why were so many different people buried together?
After archaeologists uncovered a previously undiscovered Egyptian shaft containing 54 puzzling mummified remains, they were left wondering why so many were buried together. Back on the surface, ceramics experts were reconstructing the thousands of pot shards into hundreds of vessels, measuring cups and bowls.
What's so interesting is the discovery that there are clear symbols painted onto each container with black ink. Only they don't appear to be decorative or canopic vessels, items traditionally associated with burials. So if not that, what were they for?
Each dish appeared to be labelled with the names of substances, notes about their use, and rudimentary instructions. They included beeswax, conifer, pistachia, cedar oil, bitumen, and animal fat. And some were found to be mixed together in various concoctions.
These aren't casual items. They're chemicals and substances that were specifically used in the preparation, embalming, and mummification of bodies. So these mummies weren't just buried here, but likely prepared here as well.
The first discovery of the unidentified 5 by 9 meter room, with stone slabs, ventilation, a large pot filled with ash, which was likely an incense burner, all make more sense in this context as well.
If true, perhaps the odd room at the bottom of that 13-meter shaft is some kind of ancient morgue or a mummification workshop.
Exploring the grounds around the mouth of the shafts, experts were able to identify the foundation and remaining structure of a building and a ramp, with 2 large mud brick basins on either side.
This setup looks very similar to the historical records of Ibu tents, or tents of purification. This is where the first steps of the mummification process began. Here, the body would be washed with sweet-smelling herbs and then dried out before having the organs removed.
It's believed that this morgue-type room is a mummification workshop, where funerary practitioners performed both secret and religious rites to transition someone through the last phase of life.
It's all beginning to add up. The above and below ground mortuary workshops and embalming spaces and this shaft of many different burials seem to make up a massive funeral complex.
We often think of Egyptian burials as grand experiences with pyramids and ornate tombs for the pharaohs who ruled the land. But this site, the first of its kind to be discovered, tells us so much more about ancient Egyptian society, their needs, and their access to end-of-life services.
The fact that there were so many different styles of burial is evidence that there was a funeral package for anybody at any price point, from simple gilded plaster masks to expensive silver ones, making access to the afterlife available for all.